Being here. My name is Dale Robertson. I serve as president of the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And boy, we just finished a phenomenal play. Our director is center stage. Let's give her a hand. So what we are doing tonight is it's a panel discussion. It's part of an initiative called GR Stories that the museum created, my co-creator here, Tony Baker, is a couple of years ago now. And really, actually it came from, so bear with me for a minute, actually the genesis was when we had a Zoom right at the beginning of COVID that Dr. Jelks organized. And he is the author of African Americans in the Furniture City. We had Todd Robinson, who was the author of A City Within a City. And we had Delia Fernandez, who's just published a book on Mexicans, the experience of Mexican and Puerto Ricans in Grand Rapids. And there was like, what, Dr. Jelks, 700 people on this Zoom. And one of the things that came out of it was really like the lack of really sources. The stories, right? The stories of actual events and things that had happened. And what we know, at least what we believe here at the museum, because we have artifacts and specimens, 250,000 of them, by the way, by the most conservative count. 98% donated by the people of West Michigan over 169 years, so that is a credit to all of you, right? But it's not just the objects, it's the stories. It's the narrative. We may think, I'm sitting next to the superintendent here, we may think that we make decisions based on facts and figures, and it's important that we have them, right? But we really make decisions based on the narrative, right? So collecting, putting into the archives for broad public use, the narrative, the stories of events that happened in town, and when we can, tying it to some bigger issues. So, we actually are working on some relations. I actually was with Dr. Weatherall Neal here when we went a year ago to the National Constitution Center. And we talked about, okay, can we bring some of those learnings out into the world, including Grand Rapids? And we picked the 14th Amendment as that starting place. And you can start a lot of places in the Constitution. You can get back to you can get all the way to Madison, even starting at the 14th Amendment. But we picked the 14th Amendment. And one of the reasons why, okay, so the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection, underlying due process. And so that, with Brown versus Board in 54 and Matt versus Ohio in 61, those are the cases that then apply due process and equal protection of the laws to the states. Because now there is a mechanism to enforce Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, fair housing. And so this is part of a panel discussion really connected to the 14th Amendment and Brown versus Board and how it impacted and played out here in Grand Rapids that then will go into the archives and for all future generations to be able to see these storytellers talking about their experiences. So that's a longer summary than probably I was intending to give, but about what the goal of GR Stories. We did one on the history of the Polish Halls, we did one on the 49507 project, we did one on the mounds, and so it's going to be a series playing out over, I hope, when Dr. Baker finishes his sabbatical, which he is doing on GR Stories, we will have a permanent template upon which we'll be able to build and fill out that archive for public consumption for generations upon generation upon generation. So with that, I'd like to introduce really the organizer of this event. He is a co-founder of the Grand Rapids Public Museum Schools, a former board member of the Grand Rapids Public Schools, and is a current Kent County Commissioner and is a professor of sociology at Ferris State University, Dr. Tony Baker.
Thanks so much. So this is the second time the community's allowed Dale and I to work together. With the museum, they have tried to keep us apart. So not all of our days work out. It's been an honor to get to know the people. I want to talk a little bit about getting to know this group of people. I have a great relationship with Superintendent Nill and then Ed Kettle. I've gotten to know Edie. and then really because of this, gotten to know the other panelists that are here tonight, and I just feel incredibly honored. I would come home and talk about the stories I learned, and the stories, hopefully we get half the stories. They're so complex and important. A couple things I want you to think about as we do this. So we often learn history. We just saw a children's version of how this plays out, but even though the reason I know the people on this stage is because they're really giants in the community, but when these events occurred, when they were children not much older than the children that we saw on this stage, and so that's their lives. The other thing about this is I've come to know, working with Teresa for many years in Grand Rapids Public Schools, is that we are living within. This isn't a distant past. We are living within the wake of this history. The history that we will hear about tonight explains who our schools are and where our children go to school today. So I feel incredible to be a participant. Just a couple thanks. Edie, again, for connecting the dots with polka dots in this event. Matt Vriesman, is he here? Matt Vriesman is a history teacher and is the National History Teacher of the Year at Kentwood High School. And he has his students here, and they are. He is also working on a high school curriculum that will incorporate what we do here tonight. The Grand Rapids Public Library is very essential in some of the research that we did to create this. I also wanted to thank George Bayard from the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives, whose conversations inspired, and he will be collaborating with future projects. And I also certainly want to thank Ferris for allowing me this sabbatical opportunity to get to know this. So I'm going to introduce Randall. Most people, hopefully you know Randall Jelks, author of African Americans in Furniture City, one of the foremost historians on Grand Rapids. Actually, one of the few that you'll meet, though. And if you know, he is a living history himself, because he is prodding all the people who are making decisions. And the reason I know Randall is because I've been prodded by Randall. So anyway, with that, I'm going to stop and let him take it over. Thanks.
Prodded Tony, I would say a little harsher than that. I don't prod people. I push them. Thank you all for coming out. This people of a certain age, it's our bedtime, so we will try to be prompt. The GR Stories, as has been explained to you, is an important way of creating conversations, because as William Faulkner, the great novelist, said, the past is never dead. It is always with us in some form or fashion. And we have memories, and memories are multiple. Not everyone has the same memory. Not everyone remembers the same, because it is all about where we come from. So memories are always a little bit faulty, and the trick of being a historian is you got to take the memories, but also try to fill it out with other facts or other events, because the way we remember things is our particular experience, our feelings, and so forth. So, and this conversation is really good. And the first question I have for all you panelists: what joy do you remember about going to Grand Rapids schools? Who wants to start that? Was there a good, what good memory? Tell us about what it looked like, because, you know, y'all are dinosaurs to the young people out here. I mean, like I once asked my grandmother, who was born in 1906, where she was when Lincoln freed the slaves. But she, you know, that's when you could still hit children, which I found myself on the floor. But again, what was it, like for me, Grand Rapids is a mystery. because I grew up in New Orleans, and so when I look at the photograph of William Frantz School and escorting that young lady to school, she's 2 years my senior. So I grew up in the South. Y'all didn't grow up in the South because the school around the corner from me really was live protests of saying to 6-year-olds, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want a nigger grade. So that's my experience. Grand Rapids looks like, oh my God, this is more idyllic. So what's your experience? Now, I went to school with all black children and was perfectly happy to. And I didn't need to be around white people, excuse me for saying that, because the world that I inhabited was all black. And I had all black teachers, and they went to black colleges, and that was my world. Everybody has a different world. What was your experience like, and what was the joy of your experience? Or not joy, what's the joy of your experience? What's the West Side look like in 1965, Ed? I don't know. I knew what it looked like in 83 when I came here, but what is it like in 65? Well, tell us a little bit about where you are coming from.
Hello, hey.
Yeah.
Well, it was a very odd time. We were very ethnically separated in this town by ethnicity and by religion. And the West Side is the home of the famous furniture workers strike. And that was a very deep division between Catholic Slavics, and the Dutch, the traditional Dutch, and the Christian Reformed Church. And that never really went away. That resentment never really went away. And West Siders have traditionally been more anti-government, anti-establishment because of that strike. Because, you know, I grew up with kids of the strikers themselves, you know. And so we had that kind of underlying element there, the element of resentment, and who's the next group that's going to come in and try to take our jobs and whatever. So we kind of naturally bled into that. And then in the 50s, late 40s and early 50s, we had a big group of Polish, Lithuanian, Latvian people come. We called them, unflatteringly, DPs, displaced people. And they moved into our neighborhoods on the west side because of all the Catholic Polish churches and aid societies and things like that. You did a big thing about the halls here, and that was essential to a lot of people from the early change of the century, the last century, and then up till now even. So very ethnic, very closed-minded, a lot of old ideas back then.
Other people, Mel?
You know, I'm just thinking, and I grew up in an area where they refer to housing. Let's talk about that for a second. Redlining. Mm-hmm. And if you were African American, you were limited on where you could live. Mm-hmm. And my experience in growing up, I went to one elementary school from kindergarten through 6th, and that was Sheldon School.
And where was Sheldon today?
Sheldon's on Delaware and Sheldon Street, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the first experience I had with a major shock in education, was a speech a guy gave to the kindergartners. I was a kindergartner. And the message he left was, he said, you know, there's a good chance none of you will be successful. That's the first, he
kindergartners.
to kindergartners, 5 years old. And then I went, you know, kindergarten, first, second. And I was a pretty good athlete, pretty fast runner. And all I really cared about, was motivated about, was getting faster, running. I was a below average student. And in the 7th grade, I enrolled at South High. South High at that time was a 7th through 12th. And not all, but at least 90-some% African American when you entered. And it changed in the 10th grade when students enrolled from Burton Middle School. That was really the first time in my education that I had experienced being around a large number of white students. Now, playing sports helped me in terms of relationships, meeting people that, oh, they don't bite, they're fine, you know. But then a tragic thing occurred in my life that really shook me up and I think made a difference. My brother, my oldest brother, was the first casualty in the Vietnam War from Kent County in 1967. And Rick Benjelink, that's who I met playing basketball, I guess. And he said, Mel, I often wondered why you would never smile and you were sad. I was affected by the death of my brother. I was the only one in my immediate family that viewed his body, myself and his wife. And we determined that it's best not to, you know, to show his body. And then backing up in the 7th grade, the President of the United States, Kennedy, was assassinated. And I was a 7th grader. Then the next thing, his brother gets assassinated. Then Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Now, there were other major changes that affected my education in a very negative way. We had a new principal that came in, and he said, if you want to participate in athletics, you can't have a mustache. And a guy named Cleo Cross was the first one, and he was denied a college opportunity. He ended up going to service because he wouldn't not walk around with a mustache. He wouldn't cut it. And the next thing my parents said, Mel, you're not going to shave. Then the national media came in, and I was featured on there. I guess there's two reasons. One, my brother had just been killed in Vietnam, and we showed the Jet a picture of him with a mustache in his Army uniform. And the crazy part about it, as I've gotten older and worked for the Grand Rapids Public Schools for 40 years, was that today's time, South would not have been the only high school that had that requirement, because the superintendent, the Board of Education, would have got involved in terms of policy. And we were the only high school where you had to shave if you wanted to participate. My senior year in high school, I was not able to play football because I refused to shave. And I had nothing like I have now. And I was looking at the picture of me outside, my high school graduating picture, and me now, I do look a lot different. But one of the things I remember the most about my brother was the last time we talked was on Christmas. And he called and wanted to speak to me. And he said that, Mel, whatever you do, you don't want to get drafted. Now, if you went to college and was a full-time student, you didn't have to go. So my grades were so bad that I had to go to junior college for a semester. Now, the interesting thing about that, I graduated with honors from Western Michigan. The lowest grade I received was a B. I received the Distinguished Alumni Award, and I was given a plaque at Western and spoke in front of 5,000 people. So a lot of things went on our senior year. Besides the death of my brother was the closing of the high school. I was part of the last graduating class at South High School, and they bused students. And it was a terrible transition, especially that first year. Students from South to this day that we had three schools, Central, Creston, and Union. Most of the schools, kids went to Union High School. They get along fine now. Everything's going fine, but that time was tough. So my wife is probably saying, "Now, okay, let somebody else talk."
I am Debbie Jones. Born and raised in Grand Rapids. I attended Madison Elementary School from kindergarten to the 6th grade, and then too went to South from the 7th to the 12th grade. You know, and my experiences first in Madison were wonderful as far as my classmates, my teachers, the administrators. I was a stutterer in elementary school, and they counseled me and helped me through that. I then got to South and went to speech classes. I became a cheerleader. And one thing about reason why I went out for cheerleading was because you don't stutter when you yell. But my experiences as a cheerleader, and like Melvin said, in the 7th through the 9th grade, South was predominantly black. And because the students came over from Burton for the 10th through the 12th grade, that's where I started getting more experience with white classmates. And we all blended together. We all got along. And you know, South was, unfortunately, it was labeled as a violent place, a violent school. They're always fighting. They're always doing this. Did we see that, guys? No, we really didn't. And so my experiences were truly, truly wonderful, which has affected me as, you know, I've gone in my life too, with, again, the faculty, the administrators, even the janitors. I mean, they kept us all in place. You know, we had rules, and we followed the rules. And so that's pretty much been my experiences. They were great.
So we got two polar bears. We have one more South High person. And I want to hear from these polar bears here. The Creston graduates.
Yeah, I think it'll just stay on. You don't have to.
Okay, is it on?
Yes,
Yep,
it is.
there we go. My name's Rick Benjelink, and I'm a 1968 graduate of South High School. I grew up in Burton Heights, which back in the 60s, Burton Street, we were only about maybe 2 miles from South High School, but it was Burton Street South was all white, all Dutch. And then Burton Street North was predominantly black. That was pretty much the line right there. I went to Brookside Elementary, which was all white, and then I went to Burton Junior High School, which was 100% white. And our school wasn't, our school was pretty big. Burton Junior High School was probably bigger than South because that was our home, South High's home basketball court was at Burton. And there was some introduction there. I used to go to all the games, and my dad would drive me all over the city, and I ended up playing basketball in high school. But I remember reading the book, and it talked, and I'm not going to mention names, but whoever was the president of the board in 1968 made a statement, and well, they all did. It was in the book, A City Within a City. They talked about switching the busing from busing the white kids to South High School. They said, oh, that would never work. We can't do that. You just can't do that because they won't be welcome. Well, I want you to know that Burton Junior High School was the biggest feeder to South. It was 100% white. And we couldn't wait to get to South High School. And we were welcomed, and we just, I mean, we thrived at that school. It was wonderful. And a lot of it's a perception. And I just want to say it all starts at home. And our parents backed that. They stayed put where they were. They knew what was going to happen, but they were all for it too. And we were prepped. We were talked to. We were coached on, hey, this is going to be this. This is going to go this way. This is what our expectations are. And we followed through with that. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. We're all friends today. not too long ago, a few months, or about a month ago, we all caravanned in our vehicles to visit one of our classmates who's in Lansing, and he's wheelchair bound. And we were going to have an activity in Grand Rapids, and he couldn't make it, so we all jumped in our vehicles and went down there and hung out with him. So it's gone on for life. It's just something that, and to be honest with you, I didn't know any better. And I always say, somebody forgot, people ask me, say that, somebody forgot to tell us that we weren't supposed to get along. And there's a lot of that that's going on today. They're still saying, oh, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that. We just need to stop that.
My name is Edie Evans Hyde, and my whole journey is kind of convoluted a little bit, taking from what he was saying about the schools integrating. I lived in Johnson City, Tennessee, when I was in my early elementaries, and one year I was there for a year, and my parents decided they were going to move. They decided they were going to move here, and not, as a little girl, I'm like, why are you leaving where all my cousins and stuff are? But what had happened as an adult, I found out, and I went to Henry School, but we came here because Tennessee was integrating their school system, and instead of actually integrating the school systems, they fired all the black teachers. And my mom was a teacher. So we came here to visit some friends and some relatives of my dad's, and Grand Rapids Public Schools said, hey, we need a teacher, would you stay? And this was probably the late 60s. And so my dad ended up getting a job at JC. And my mom taught in the school system and retired. But it took me until I was an adult to really realize why that had happened. So my experience, the way I say it's kind of convoluted, is my experience is coming from
The South.
the South. Coming from, and not even really knowing anything about race, really, but just knowing all these were my cousins, and I was my grandmother, and it was just that feeling. Then we moved here, and I was a little country bumpkin, trying to deal with, the south side of Grand Rapids, which is a whole different thing to talk about. My mom put me in dresses all the time, and I think I was kind of beat up a little bit like little Lily. So sometimes I kind of cry when I kind of think about her part and what I had to go through. Then we went to the North End because of Auburn Hills, and you guys probably know a little bit about Auburn Hills, but my parents got a house there. So I went to Northeast Junior High, and that was the first time I was in a mixed group of people. And some of the black kids that were there were bused as well, probably from South. In fact, two of my best friends were from South that went to Northeast. And then I ended up at Creston. But what my personality is, the type of personality that I didn't really realize how tough it was being black. I didn't know anything about the what do you call it, the redlining. I didn't know any of that as a kid. I just kind of went along with the flow. And I got a couple Creston people, are they still here? I have a couple Creston buddies who are here who talked to me right before the show started. And she said, Edie, they said, Edie, we didn't even know anything about this stuff, did we? Did we know our friends were bused? I'm like, I knew they were bused, but that's because that's kind of the black thing that was going on. But my goal or my personality was not separatism. I felt like I had friends. I just wanted to make friends in every situation. So I never really felt put upon about being black. I just kind of wanted to do what I wanted to do and be where I wanted to be, and that's how I took it. But I think that was kind of the 70s to me. Like, we were fighting a little bit about what was going on in the late 60s. And so my good experience is that I just loved the people that I was around, black, white, whatever. And yeah, and you'll see out there on the board that I was like the first black homecoming queen at Creston High School. And after 100 years, people still say, "You were the first black homecoming queen." I'm like, yes. And then I don't know if Sherry's in here. Sherry, okay, so my stage manager for the show, her name is Sherry. She lived in Auburn Hills too. And she says, well, Edie, I was the second. So I was like, okay, that all works. So I had basically to wrap it up, I had a wonderful time. I really did. And I think that it made me who I am by being able to experience all of these different opportunities that I think Creston gave me.
Good evening. So I think it's an interesting question. And for me, I sat in a really unique seat. So I started in the Grand Rapids Public Schools in 1964, and I retired in 2019. So I spent all of my life, the majority of my life, in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And I've loved it from day one. I've always loved Grand Rapids Public Schools. Even through the bad times, and there were bad times at Creston, I still loved school, and I loved my classmates. I went to Madison Park Elementary School and then went to South Middle. And at South, that was home to me. My keychain right now, I have a South Trojan, right? On my keychain, that's how much of a home it was. And we were bused to Creston. We lived on Union Street. I lived across the street from Debbie, so I've known Debbie my whole life. But I think the sad part, so there were good parts. My time in school was great. But you can't have good without the bad. And I think for those of us that were bused to Creston or anywhere, we should have been able to graduate from South High School. And now, because I was a superintendent, I really know the backstory. We really should have been able to go to South, right? And it was unfortunate because they bused black and brown children from the city to a school when they did not bus white children in the city, right? That just wasn't to be. And now I do know, positively sitting in the seat as a superintendent for almost 8 years, that could have been done, should have been done, and it would have been the right thing to do. But people felt that the time wasn't right. And during my time at Creston, unfortunately, I think, and it may be still this way, if you don't have something to offer a school, it's pretty transactional, right? So if you don't have something to offer a school, I don't know then what the school has to offer you. I wasn't an athlete, right? I was probably a troublemaker. Only because I fought for social justice, right? That in the early 70s, right? I wore a big afro, then you need to get out. You fight for whether it's black kids or white kids, we want it to be one. Nope, you get out, right? So always being put out. And then to go home to my parents, I had 9 brothers and sisters, so my parents, they said, it's you. Everybody else can get along. But I've always fought for social justice, and that wasn't to be in the early 70s. So great memories, right? But I sit in a different seat now knowing what's behind the curtain.
So here's my question, because I'm looking at this from a Southerner's point of view, right? I mean, Grand Rapids really never had segregation, right? South High. Okay, now let me throw the question out, because a part of it being a good teacher is make controversy. So I'm gonna make a little controversy. When I look at it, black people went to Central High, right? That was the #1 school. Black people went to South High. In point of fact, the famous civil rights case of 1927 was started by 2 black students who went to South. Now, South also had the KKK in the school in 1919. That was striking. But people went. Gerald Ford played football with black students. So by Southern standards, right, people went back and forth to school. So what's the difference about this city as opposed to some other cities? I'm just asking you all about your memories because it's really important. Like, well, people went to school or went on a job or in a different way. So how was Grand Rapids separated? You described blocks. The West Side, I understand. I lived on the West Side by accident when I first came here. In 1983. And people kept looking at me and I was like, what? But I get it. I mean, I get the ethnicity because I came from Chicago and y'all ain't got nothing on Chicago in terms of ethnicity and the fights that went on about that. But it's the same. So I'm just curious about, just in school, you have a different system here. There has always been black students in majority white schools. So I'm just curious about your experience of that and how, if there was segregation or separation or segmentation, however we want to use the word, and how did it function in Grand Rapids for you all? Edie says, my world, you know, I'm different. She's an artist too, you know, give her, God bless her. I've known Edie a while, so I can say that. But, yeah, say that.
I can remember when, making reference to Edie Creston, I was a teacher at Iroquois Middle. And Iroquois Middle at that particular time was the largest middle school in the state of Michigan. So they changed it to Integrate Creston. So they bused students from the southeast that lived south of Franklin Street to Riverside Middle and Northeast. I know that so well because I was asked to transition with the kids and go to work out of both middle schools. You mentioned Gerald Ford. And Teresa had mentioned that her and Debbie lived in the same neighborhood that Gerald Ford grew up in.
Right.
Gerald Ford lived a block from them. All right. And he went to South High School. I mentioned earlier when I talked about living on Prospect Street. When we first moved on Prospect, we were the first and only black family that lived on Prospect. Okay? But I would think, and I'm not certain, South, I know when it closed, it had the highest percentage of black students. My wife graduated from Ottawa Hills. She was in a class of 400 students, and they had about 40 or 50 black students in Ottawa Hills in 1968, same year that we graduated. So just reflecting back, I'm not certain. I know Burton is now predominantly, I would think, Hispanic. And the people that live in the neighborhood now are Spanish. But when Rick went there, it was predominantly white. And they integrated, the kids that came over, transitioned from Burton to South, they came over to join us in the 10th grade.
So, Madam Superintendent, then what was the ruling, the courts, why was this justified because of the busing decision? Because now, Madam Superintendent, you can open this up now. I'm gonna let you know like a good lawyer. Us historians want to see the archives of the Grand Rapids Public School. We don't even know where they are. And that's how we do our work. Yeah, but we need to see the details. I'm just saying from my profession. You know, we nosy people. We want to know what's the paperwork. So But what was the decision, you said now from your seat, what was the decision to bus kids who seemed to be getting along perfectly well, doing what you expected them to do? What was that decision from your perspective now?
You know, the records are all in the public library, so that's one. It
All right, Julie, where
No.
are you? Are you still here? Do you have them, Julie? No.
If you go back and look at the minutes, you would have in the minutes of, absolutely you do. That's correct. So they're there. That's one. But just knowing that the decisions were made by people, right?
Oh, of course.
Right?
Always.
And so had parents, my parents, Debbie's, Mel's, all the rest of them, had they gone and fought, I think they could have had a voice, right? Because people are elected in these positions. And that's what I'm saying. I think that something could have been done, right? Every decision that is made, every board policy, right? People come together and decide. If it is not written in the school code, decisions are made by the people. And so I'm saying now, knowing the process, right, of how decisions are made, it didn't have to be. Right.
Ed, you're shaking.
I'm shaking my head. I'm sorry. Grand Rapids was at least always a very provincial type city, very closed, you know, and everyone hung on to their own ethnicity, their own culture, their own religion very hard. And the Dutch Christian Reform was the overwhelming force in the city for a long time. And we always had white politicians. I mean, just that's the way it was. And so I'm not as kind to history as maybe Teresa's trying to be, but it was just flat out racism, period. They just would not make that decision. There's no way they would have ever, in my opinion, in my own memory of all the stuff that was going down back then. My dad, I come from a little bit different background because I was talking to some of my old classmates. I told them I'm going to be on this panel. And I come from a different background where my dad was the director of social services in Grand Rapids for a long time. And so I grew up around black people. It wasn't a big deal. And I was raised in a very respectful environment, too. There was no crazy stuff. And so when, you know, the kids came to Union that first year, it's like, okay, big deal. Didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't afraid of anybody. I just had a whole different perspective on this thing. And so when the whole story about how they drove this decision, well, I went to school with kids whose dads were on the school board making these decisions, you know. And I knew right where they were coming from. They weren't fooling me. And I don't think they fooled anybody, you know. So it was just that compression of time. A couple years before, in '67, we had race riots in the city.
That's right.
The West Side became very noted because up and down Fulton Street and other streets, there were guys out on their front porch with shotguns across their lap, you know, and that, talk about uninviting, you know. So the statement was made. It was harsh and unfair, but it was there. And so by the time the kids arrived at Union, I was shocked but not surprised of the reaction of some of the kids I grew up with coming out there with chains and baseball bats. It was like, what in the world? Why? But they did, and then we traveled on that year and tried very hard. I went to the kid in my school, Gary Greenshields was his name. His dad, I think at the time, was the dean of psychology at Grand Valley. And so he invited us to come on over. So a bunch of us white kids went over there, and we were confused. You know, what are we going to do? We can't fix this. You know, we have to have the adults fix it. And he said, no, you have to fix this. You have to find ways to get along with these kids because the adults are not going to do it for you. So we sat around, we thought about it, we said, well, so we went back to the principal and we said, could we have like a student union room or something where we could just hang out? And they thought about it for a while, so they gave us a room that was empty kind of on the lower level, and they brought in, I think, some a couch and some tables and chairs, and I think we had a ping pong table maybe, I can't remember, but at least that gave us a chance to socialize, And it was always the best white kids with the best black kids. I mean, they just kind of, that intellectual culture or the culture of going forward, having a purpose in life, all that kind of stuff, that's not universal to any color. So all the kids that were like-minded and wanted to go forward, go to college, be something, they kind of came together in more sensible ways. Kids who weren't as sensible were throwing chairs in the cafeteria, It was the most bizarre time of anyone. And I felt always so bad for the kids because, talk about getting landed in hell.
Yeah, I always thought that when the desegregation of schools, just like what my mom experienced in Tennessee, is like, oh, you have to do this. But there was nothing in place to make it successful. I always, in my mind, thought it was meant not to really be successful. And I think right now that, education is like the number one thing that brings equity to people in my mind. And what is going on right now because of, fear or something, is that education is being attacked even as we are going through right now. Because a lot of us up here knew that no matter what happened, we had a good education. And we went on to colleges, and whether it was with affirmative action or whatever it was very helpful. And we have people who are in leadership positions right now who are helping the city, helping the county, helping the state. And when you take those safeguards away or have no plans for that, your goal is to completely shut down the opportunity for education and shoot down the opportunities for all people in your community. And like I said, I went through things pretty artsy, I guess. What you said, I was the art person. Yes.
I knew you do Cedric's. Come on.
Well, yeah. Well, Cedric, though, right? Someone said who, right?
Cedric Ward.
Cedric Ward was an art person here. He actually started the theater company, Robeson Players, where I got my first start in theater. I would have never thought of being an actor at all without him. And he was an artist, but he was a huge social justice person, to the point where he would tell you off. Now, some of us will just be really, really nice about how we tell you how things are supposed to go.
No, not Cedric.
And he didn't care. So I've learned from him, but I've learned to be nicer to people and, that type of thing. But that meant a lot for me. And so I think the number one thing that, for me to walk away with, is understanding that education has been fought forever in an equal sense. And I think the 1970s for me was the pinnacle of trying to make those changes. That's why I didn't think much about it. I was just there to learn and have fun and make friends. Where I think the late 60s was a little harder because that's when things were really heating up at that time. So anyway, that's just my thought.
I think for me, it wasn't the other students, even though we were bused, right, to Creston. Students were great. It was the faculty, right? And because they have the power of ink, right, you had to put up with whatever it was in order to graduate, right? And so you had to tolerate it. And then with parents like my parents, they were, I don't care what they said, you get back in there. Right? At the end of the day, this is what you better deliver. And when I say that I think that they should have fought, I am about social justice. I do believe in fighting, and I say that we should have kept fighting, Ed. Right? Yep. It was a riot anyway. We should have kept going.
Yes.
I know you had mentioned that this started in 1966 when all this was talked about, but how was it put out, and it wasn't. It was not, because our parents did not have a chance, to fight for that. And so by the time it was found out, and we also were told that the Urban League was in favor of this. So by the time it was found out that this was going to happen, it was late in 1967. So here we are as seniors, enjoying our senior year, having a great time. We've got the class of 1969 behind us, looking forward to be in our shoes the next year. And we are in our cap and gown. We are standing on the stage of South High School taking our senior class picture in our light blue and navy blue. And, we're getting ready to take this picture. And we took the picture, didn't really think much about it then, but we found out that day that we were going to be the last senior graduating class out of South High School. And we were devastated. And to this day, that picture is now in the memorabilia room at, I'm gonna always call it South High School, no offense to Job Corps. But that picture is 5 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and there's 253 students in our cap and gown, and none of us are smiling. None of us, because it was devastating that we found out that day that there would no longer be a senior high school class coming out of South High School. And it has affected, a lot of us to this day, even the class of 69. And I will say this, our class of 68, we've always included the class of 1969 with us for the reunion from the very beginning, because they were yanked out of that school and separated from not only from their from their classmates, but from their community, because they're now bused out to Union or Creston or Ottawa. So it was a devastating time, and and like I say, our parents never had a chance to fight for us.
I remember in September of 1968, it's in one of the books, a high official said they'd already closed South, and he made the comment, and it's in the book, about he was worried about the teachers at that school. He was speaking about South. He was really concerned about what the students had learned at that school, and he was very concerned about what they hadn't learned. And it is just, if you look at our class, we have doctors and lawyers and judges and ministers and school officials and teachers. There's so many teachers from our class. I was a teacher. And we get our reunions, we all get together, and there's just tons of them. And if the students that we graduated with, if they didn't go to college, they all worked for Steelcase, GM, drove trucks. It was an absolutely amazing thing, and those were totally false statements. And that got to me. It just made me sick to my stomach when I saw that. We were proud people. We were proud of ourselves, of our school, and to actually quote in a book that someone was concerned with their education is just totally wrong. And I think there was a lot of that type of decision-making made because we wouldn't hear it till later on. And it was a very, very sad day.
That really kind of went through also, and I will say this, when I was at Creston, my mom came to meet one of the counselors that I had, and the counselor was setting me up to take, long story short, she was saying that I didn't have to take certain classes because I wasn't going to college. And it was just a matter of fact type of thing. And of course, my mom's like, "Ah, hell no." Because she was a teacher and she had her master's degree, and my dad was going to school to be a teacher as well. And so they were like, why would someone tell you that? But it was just that time. And luckily, I had parents who told me different,
So why did they close it?
Closed South?
South.
Yeah.
Well,
Or
that was
supposedly for integration.
Yeah, it's supposedly to integrate, but it was an integrated school, but they were supposedly integrating the school. So that's and of course, the viewpoints, as everybody stated, ran through those decisions. So where we come as policymakers, how we view things, and who we listen to, it makes a big difference. And so that's why. Mel?
You know, a couple of things. What's your name? I'm sorry. Edie. Edie. I shouldn't, that's a different name. Edie. It's a nice name, though. Edith. But Edie's fine, too. A couple things that she said that reflected a long-term memory on my part. One, my senior year, in order to go to college and get an application filled out, you had to get a signature of support from your counselor. And my counselor said, Mel, you know, they're hiring at General Motors. I'll never forget this. And you know, General Motors, both of my parents worked at General Motors. So there was nothing wrong about a General Motors. But I wanted to go to college. And she said, and she didn't sign it. So I went, that's probably one of the reasons. I can't put that all on her because my grades were not that good. I had to go to junior college for a semester. But the interesting part, when I graduated from Western, became a teacher, became an administrator, I ended up being that same counselor's boss. And I often, I never reminded her of that. But oh, I wanted to say something so bad. All right, I never did though. All right, and she's gone now, so God bless her. All right. All right.
You know, in the South, that's a real slam. Yeah. God bless you.
And
God bless you, honey.
One other thing that bothers me too, and while I'm going now, when I went to Western, my wife and I, when she graduated and we had worked in an urban area for 4 or 5 years, we never had to repay a penny. We received what they referred to as the Martin Luther King grant. They don't have it. Now, you talk about trying to get some of these kids got all these loans and they're backed up, you know, financially for many years. But it's amazing that we had a better situation, an easier way to go to college 55 years ago.
I want to just ask you all how you think this, because when I arrived in Grand Rapids in '83, it was just shortly after a controversy about Superintendent John Dow. And it was still in the air. How do you think this, your era impacted the future of Grand Rapids Public Schools? Because when I came to Grand Rapids, many families would have their kids in Grand Rapids Public School. I'm talking about white families, that is. And then about the 4th or 5th grade, move out to the burbs.
I know I'm talking a lot, but I have to respond to that particular point. Today, John Dow is my best friend. He lives in California. We talk all the time. My wife probably gets tired of us talking. And it was Jesse Jackson came in. 2 board meetings were moved to the Ford Field House. We had 5,000 people. It was ridiculous. He was a very popular superintendent. He did a good job. Now, his life went on, and he's hugely successful. But I just wanted to make that comment, that we talked all the time. We still talk. I got to know him when I was in the first class of Upward Bound at Aquinas College. We were in that first, Debbie, were you in that? Okay, we were in that first class of Upward Bound. He was one of the teachers, and we used to meet on the weekends. And that's when I first met him, and that relationship continued.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to, because the school system, it seems to me, has taken a hit, this is just my observation, off of this period 68 to, let's say 1968 to 78. And by the time I arrived in Grand Rapids, there is maybe it started in the late 60s, but it's still a mass exodus of families from the school system. That's just an observation that I made. And would you say this era created distrust? At one time in the early 60s, Grand Rapids was named as one of the few cities had top education around the country. It really was. So suddenly it goes from top to bottom, and the only thing that I can see is that new people are coming into the school system, and suddenly it's supposed to be bottom. And that, again, back to Ed's point earlier.
Yeah, not everything can be blamed on our situation. We also had the introduction of freeways.
Yes,
And that just opened up the doors for people to leave. The city of Walker was built mostly on the backs of West Siders getting off the West Side to move to Walker to get out of the school system. You know, and I keep bad-mouthing West Siders, but, you know, what are you going to do? So there were lots of different things that motivated those moves, and it was mostly based on opportunity. Yeah, could I move? Yeah, I could move, and I could still sell my house in Grand Rapids for a reasonable price and then buy a nice new house in Walker or Kentwood or Wyoming or whatever. So they took advantage of that. They just ran away. And so, yes, then that left us with the kind of the brain drain, I suppose, but also the income drain. And we went from an upper middle to middle class district to a middle to lower middle class and impoverished. And that was the balance. And that just further fueled the racist language and the attitudes. And, you know, it was just like if you could do everything wrong, they nailed it, you know. You know what I'm saying? Every decision that was being made back then was not a good one. It was reactionary, or they took too long, or they went too fast. One or the other, you know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so we, you know, as young people, we were just spectators in the whole thing.
And it was based on race, right? I think so. A lot of the decisions that were made, even people leaving, was based on race, right? So it wasn't that it was just middle class. We know that poverty absolutely has a bearing on education, but people were moving because of the color of someone's skin. And then they made decisions based on that. Not only that, but you had people in education, in the Grand Rapids Public Schools, they were making decisions based on those children that they were serving, right? And so whether it was black children, brown children, or poor white children, right? They grouped everyone together. But when you start out and make a decision based on one thing, that you get what you got, right? And that's exactly what happened to the Grand Rapids Public Schools, right? And whether it was from the 60s, the 70s, even on into the 80s. And I will say that change is made at that board table, regardless of what people say. And unless you get the right board members there that are there for the right reason, fighting for all children, right, you will continue to have exactly what we have today. And I will say, and I've attended board meetings since 1975, and I have seen wonderful board members, people that actually cared about every single student, regardless of color, right? And Ed, I've known you, right? I've known you. The same thing. Ed, Tony Baker, Tony is here. But we've had great board members that fought for all children, and I think that's what we have to continue to do, regardless of the color of skin, right? We need board members that will fight for these children, right? And you can't have 3 or 4. You need 5. You need 5, right? And at all times, you need to count 5. That's the only way. You used to talk about equity, right? Education is the greatest equalizer. But if you don't have 5 in Grand Rapids, you'll never get there.
May I make a statement? What you're saying, well, first of all, Teresa and I go way back, and neither one of us even knew it, but I met Teresa when she was like looking over this desk up in the superintendent's office at the old JC built, and David Doyle, one of my best friends ever, he was the communications guy back then, and all through that Dow crazy thing, whatever. So I guess my point is we're facing another threat right now, and sure, it's racism, and it's outside people being crazy, and it's the internet, and it's everything else, but there's just bad decisions that have been made in the city that are going to have catastrophic effects on our schools, and one is the zoning code. They have created this standard. The standard always existed. I used to be on a zoning board, so I got a little of intelligence on this, but the standard is no more than 4 unrelated adults in any given home. What they did is amplified that in the, I don't know, whenever it was. But what happened is then landlords came in and said, oh, thank you. And they go buy grandma's house for cash money, and the kids are like, yeah, I'll take it. And boom, they knock another bedroom in the place, and now they have 4 people at $500 to $750 a bedroom. And there's no recourse. There's no benefit to the schools, and the property values don't go up. The property values are still based on the value of the home itself. But if you go to sell that house, they add on the cash flow. So a $100,000 home is now $225,000. Who can afford it? You know? So there's all of that going on, and people are being priced out, and families have been pushed out of the city of Grand Rapids now, and we're seeing the results. I mean, you went through some cuts. We went through some cuts when I was on the board. We had to open schools, close schools, whatever. But this one is one of the biggest I remember in my life. This is horrible.
So public policy
Yes.
at the city level has a great effect and so forth. From the audience, do you have any questions? And I really, because this is GR Stories, and you get your shot at these people, or you can add to the stories. Anybody have a question, please? Hold on, so that everybody can hear you. No.
Hi, my name is Audrey Mayfield. I was a part of the busing, and I was the one who went to Union High School. I went to South High School from the 7th through the 9th grade. My whole family was there. It was 9th, 10th, 11th grade. And I was a part of when we went to Union where we did not go to school for the whole semester because of what we met when we got off the bus. Now, it was very tragic, and it hasn't been told. One part that's missing in the story is what happened to our African American men, because we lost hundreds of our brothers because they did not want to go to jail, and they knew they was going to fight, so they quit school. Noah Seifler started a program, tried to get them to go to GED. Baxter tried to get them to stay in school to get a GED. So we lost a lot of our black men, and there was a lot of fighting and violence and people beating up on the girls. So it was a very tragic story. And you know, as I'm talking, you can tell the emotion is still there, because I've seen a lot of stuff that was never talked about, never written in a book or anything. And our parents, some of our parents was on the bus. So our parents was trying to do the best that they could do, but they didn't have any recourse or anyone to assist them. So when the story is told that our parents wasn't involved, they did the best they could because they were scared too. You know, so the story of Union High School, those of us who had to live through it to this day should be told, especially if you can hear from an African American male.
What's it like today? The school. Has it improved? Is it better now, or is it still?
Never been back.
Huh?
Never been back inside
Have you
the
heard
door.
anything, though? I mean, I just wonder what the success of Union is, because I remember that whole time, too, and it was sad. It was awful.
I really wouldn't be able to answer that honestly, because I have removed myself
Yeah.
from Union High School, and I am an educator. GRCC, I was there for 26 years as a professor and whatsoever, but I never even wanted to go back to the school because even when I go by there, the emotions come up because
Well,
of
you know-
what we had to witness.
And you know what the difference was? We were transitioned, all-white school to a black school. We were transitioned. It was planned. We were talked to. We had the opportunity to meet people. That was forced, and that's the difference, and that's wrong. That's what's wrong about all of that. is
And
it's
the other
forced.
thing, I lived on Lafayette. We lived on Lafayette. The people across the street went to a different school. We lost all of our friends,
that
all the
too, yeah.
relationships. And then we were on a bus for half an hour.
Yep.
I mean, going somewhere that we knew that when we got off the bus, they didn't want us there. So we missed almost a whole semester of school.
I can't even
And it was, I mean, we didn't have anybody to go to help us, to even resolve some of the issues that we were facing once we got in school.
Yep.
Now, you guys talking about the black teachers, we didn't have any black teachers out of Union High School.
Yeah.
So we
That's
had
a-
no
that-
one
I
there to
read that in
comfort
the-
us or anything. So.
Yep, I read that in that book also, and yeah, that's too bad.
My kids graduated from Union. And so I watched from when I was there with the Troubles, which I was a senior, so I didn't see as much as you did for sure. But my kids went through that school, and I watched the school change a lot. My oldest kid and second oldest kid, they graduated in the 90s, early 90s. And then my daughter went, and I could tell the school had changed a little bit even then, you know. But then when my youngest son was going to go to Union, he was at Westwood, and I went on a field trip with them. And it was a great field trip. I was really enthused. But the kids weren't. And they were hanging out and just kind of didn't care. And I thought, wow. And so I talked to a few people, and it was just probably the hangover of your depression about the whole thing just lasted. It stayed in the community. And I never even considered that before. I never thought about it, you know. And it just changed everything. The whole attitude in that school had changed. Now I think they're doing pretty well, but it was, Teresa had a lot to do with changing things. And I got to watch it, you know. So, I mean, that's flat out. So there's one.
So, this conversation is really necessary, but it's really hard to be had without the next conversation in the series, Living, because so much of this was impacted by redlining. And so I graduated from Ottawa Hills in 2003, and I can tell you that still a lot of what was experienced by my mom, who graduated in 78, Edie in what, 68? 75, okay. But a lot of that was still felt. By the time I got to Ottawa, we had maybe 40 students that weren't black. And of those, they went to Montessori, so they were even separated, within another school. But I will say, when you talk about redlining and you talk about the extraction of resources, I had maybe there were 3 black teachers in my school, you know, and I look at that as it's really hard to invest in going to a school when you know the people who are teaching you are not invested in you. And we still feel that because the schools are just so underfunded. But again, that goes back to property values. That goes back to, you know, the history of the highways. It's this big circular conversation, but it's still felt.
Thank you.
Dr. Jelks, I think that your point is well taken. So I graduated in 1977 from Creston High School, and I think that one of the things that's missing right now, we need to encourage more people to go into education. And so whatever that program is, we need to build our own and sort of grow our own educators. They're not out there. And there are districts all of our districts are trying to find teachers of color. And it's just not a profession that we are choosing. And so I think until we can increase the pay and give better benefits and literally wrap our arms around these young folks so that they can go into education, we're going to continue to see these young people, where people of color especially, you're going to struggle because there's not going to be anyone that look like you. We have to grow our own. We, as a community, need to grow our own and try to encourage young people to go into teaching. But you can't do that when we bad-mouth teachers and we talk down about teachers and we don't pay them enough and so forth and so on. We just have to continue, I think, as a community, as a state, as a country, we have to continue to build these people up to go into teaching to help. It's a heavy lift.
Our
It's a heavy
teachers
lift.
at South were the best. They were absolutely dedicated to us. They made us all sing in the choir. Literally made us sing in the choir, but we loved it. It was fabulous. We were involved in everything, the plays, the musicals. You can see, oh, it was just amazing.
They encouraged us.
And
really
they did. They were
Sometimes
just,
they pushed us too, but you know,
Yep.
it helped.
you're right, that's very, very important.
They did it for us, we were just there.
Yep, oh, ours were great.
My name is Max Gibbs, and I'm much older than all of them because I was privileged to do my student teaching at South High School in 1968, and they graduated, so that made me, what, 4 years older than all of them. But I can tell you the comments that Mr. Benjlik made. It was a wonderful school. I can't tell you how shocked I was to hear. We have to move those kids someplace else. It's not a safe place to be. There weren't many people who looked like me in that school at that time. I didn't have one bad word. No, not one single MF was used on me the whole time that I was there. And that was the new favorite term that was coming out. But, and I can tell you what a shock to those white ears it was. But you just went, okay. That didn't make him a bad person. But South was a wonderful place. I had the privilege then of staying there and taught at South Middle. And I loved South Middle. The kids, it just was an amazing place. Muhammad Ali came and spoke to us, talked about how important it was for the men, which were the boys in the audience, to be men and to be fathers and good breadwinners, because that's what was going to save our race, he said. But it was a wonderful place to be. And thank you all for being there, and thank you for tonight. You've been awesome. Thank you.
I do want to let everyone know that even though South closed in 1968, the spirit of South High continues. We meet every month at Marge's Donut Den. Marge was a graduate of South High School, and we meet there every month. We talk, we have a good time, we share stories. We have a scholarship at GRCC in the name of South High School. For 28 years, that scholarship has been at GRCC, and we have scholarships that we've given to 2 students every year. Right now in that endowment is $275,000. The spirit of South High School will live on long after we are gone. So they may have taken us, you know, they may have tried to take that school away from us, but they didn't take our spirit. And every time we ride down Hall or Jefferson, it is still South High School. The name is still etched over the front doors, and it will always be South High School. And the blessing is, now that it's Job Corps, that building and those the teachers and everybody in there, it's still educating young people as it started out in 1915. So it continues. I just wanted everybody to know we're still here.
Hello, my name is V. I currently go to East Kentwood High School. I'm a senior there. And what me and my classmates were discussing earlier when one of you had brought up a point about how South High School was a diverse and very like opening, like an open arms school, like a warm school for different racial backgrounds to sort of blend together. We wanted to point out that there was a reflection of South High School and East Kentwood High School currently, because back then you guys stated that there was a sort of perpetuation that it was violent and it was constantly a fight going on. And we were talking about how although there are some situations at EK, we make the news a lot, sadly, but there's like rarely a time where they talk about how we as a school have these different opportunities and these different avenues where people from different backgrounds are able to come together. And we just wanted to like, try to find the words, I'm sorry. We wanted to talk about how reflective our current situation is too with y'all's. And not to say that it's like exactly the same, but we just wanted to, yeah, reflect.
If I can, well, go on. I just lost my train of thought.
Well, one of the things is that East Kentwood is also gets this now negative label, right? As South had gotten this negative label. And maybe, maybe it'd be great someday for you all to invite those alums from South to come and talk to you all at East Kentwood and vice versa, so that you can have that conversation about what's true and what's false. And because whenever there's mixed race, it gets labeled negative. So thank you for that question. And I think you meet some of these people afterwards. I have one more question, and then we should wrap it up here.
Randall, can I make a statement real quick?
Yes.
The one thing that we haven't done well, and even when I was on the board in the 90s, we struggled and tried to get to this point, but it's relevant education, culturally relevant education. We just haven't been able to get that right. And when I was on the board, I've always made a reputation for myself, but when I was on the board, I recommended that we go to true site-based management and neighborhood schools. And boy, did I get my can whipped. But the way I saw it is this is the only way we're going to make things culturally significant if we give the people in that school, the parents and people in that school, the right and the power to direct the cultural message within the school. It just seems so simple to me. How can you not get that? But they couldn't get it, so, And one other thing, one of the surprise stories from the big desegregation thing was when those kids got off the boat, or West Side, or here, when the kids got off the bus, I heard so many white kids say, "Wait, there's white kids at South?" People didn't even know.
Yeah, well, just a quick question, culturally relevant. Now, this is my Southern experience. Southerners said, yeah, we want local schools controlled by people who are culturally relevant, meaning non-black people. Yeah. So we always have to remember our ears, we hear things differently, right? So it's important to think about what is culturally specific and what is relevant, because in each case, it may be different from your experience, right? I lived around the corner from a school. I could literally throw a rock in its yard, and they said, oh, well, we want local control. There was a whole bunch of black people lived around that school. But, so that's why we have to always ask, what's your experience with this? And this is an important conversation. Last question here.
Yes, thank you. My name is Silas Deans. I'm in the class of 1968. I just wanted to mention a few things to you about as we talk about South High School. As African American, I think that all of us are very fortunate to go to South High School. South High was a very, and is a very historic high school. And we can say that based on, y'all notice what that rock represents? As we talking about South, we're not touching base yet, have I heard, about our #1 history. And that is that we have a big rock there, and it represents over 4,000 soldiers that fought in the Civil War for Emancipation Proclamation for the Civil War. And that rock represents over 4,000 soldiers fought, 550 died. Grand Rapids played a role in the Civil War. And we, as African Americans, are very proud that we were fortunate to go to that school. Because how many more schools in the state of Michigan is built on the training grounds? The training ground is called Cattleman Anderson 1861. And if you go see that rock, it'll show when the cavalry was going to battle. And just to recognize it, understand, and know that Grand Rapids played a role in the Civil War. You know. Number two, as how we're historic, is we're the only high school in the state of Michigan to educate a student, Gerald R. Ford, and that student became the first and only president from the state of Michigan of the United States. Now, is that historic? And how many African Americans get the opportunity to go to a high school that the president went to? Or before. I got a history report now. I went to the library and got all the presidents, 46 presidents we have, and to see what high schools did they go through. Some of them didn't go to high school, nor college. But I'm going through the list. I want to write a book and do the story on South High and its main history. It's, like I said, 2 stages of real history is the building the training grounds for the Emancipation Proclamation, and to be raised to educate not just Gerald R. Ford. Al Green was a student there. Gerald R. Ford, the boxing champion, dad, he went to school there. Emmett Bolden, he fought for the civil rights where African Americans didn't have to sit in the back seat or the balconies at the theaters. He took it to the Michigan Supreme Court. He won. This was back in 1926, 9 years after the school was open. It's a lot of history on South High School that we need to pay attention to. We were fortunate in 1968. A lot of things was going on. Take note that Kennedy, President Kennedy got killed, and then when when Martin Luther King got killed in March of '68, it was a big riot. It wasn't a little riot. It was through the community. Not having anything to do with South, but people were really disappointed that Dr. King got killed. We're talking about in 1965, he was down in Georgia fighting for rights. This is 100 years after we were set free. Martin Luther King is fighting for us to have voting rights. So we're not free all the way. We still going through changes today as we've been going through since we were enslaved. We're still fighting. So just take note, South is a historic school. We African Americans are very proud to go to school there. And the spirit, as Debbie said, will continue.
Is there a movie coming?
I want to thank you all for this conversation. We should have many more. And thank you all for staying this evening. I've been told by the powers that be, everybody needs to go home. But no, all seriously, this has been enlightening and continue to enlighten us with this conversation. And I hope for many people who experience suffering and also healing, we've got work to do. Thank you all very much.